in preparing for this, a lot of times as an extension agent, if I'm asked to do a presentation on anything, I might look for a publication from extension on that topic. But for quail, there's really not a lot available for homeowner scale quail production. There's a little bit more about raising bob white quail, which are our native quail to the southeast, and then raising those for use in hunting primarily is what people are using those for, or bird dog training. So I think that this will give a good overview of where you might go to get the right resources, how to assess whether or not what you're reading is valid or worth using in your home flock. But also, I think revealed a real need that I think Extension could work to fill in providing research-based information. So the first thing I'll start with talking about, and the first thing to consider before you get birds, if you order eggs and incubate them, you will quickly have birds. And if you allow them to grow within about 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, you will have fertilized eggs that might start hatching. So it really doesn't take long to get a lot of birds. If you've kept chickens at home, people make the joke about chicken math, how they just add up. It happens even faster with quail. I don't currently have a home flock, so everything that I'll be showing you today are photos of birds that we did have. We did not start a flock this past spring. That's usually how my family would keep quail. We would order eggs in April or May, or rather to be delivered in April or May. We would incubate those in our incubator, and I've got some photos of that. And then we would start from there. And we only purchased one batch of eggs. We would get about 48 eggs delivered. And then from there, we just took the eggs that our hens were laying and incubated those to get future generations. I'll talk a little bit about it. I may have some photos of this. We experienced our first year of having quail, we experienced a real drop off in fitness. The health of the chicks and the adults that were produced really dropped off from our first batch until I think we had about 6 generations that year. And we weren't paying attention to genetics at that time. And that, I think, was a mistake on our part. We didn't pay attention to who was breeding with whom. So we may have been breeding siblings, and parents and offspring may have been in the same pen. And so we noticed nothing else changed. We used the same feed, the same water. They were in the same housing. We were following the same cleaning regimen. So that's what we attribute our first years. We saw a lower hatch rate. So of the eggs that we were putting in the incubator, each successive batch of eggs, we got fewer and fewer successful hatches. And then like I was saying, the fitness, the obvious strength of those hatchlings declined over time too. And so we attribute that to genetics. And so we made some changes that I'll be able to talk about the next few times that we did it. my family was raising quail for the meat. So we did occasionally try the eggs. My wife one time made deviled quail eggs just as a novelty when some friends were coming over, but we only did that once. It's a lot of work. But my son thinks that it is the perfect ratio of the deviled yolk mixture to egg because it's one bite and you get everything compared to a chicken egg prepared that way. So because we were raising these for meat and we needed more eggs to get more birds, we would usually harvest all of our adults in the late fall. And this is because quail will stop laying eggs. And so we did not want to keep feeding and taking care of those birds through the winter. It made more sense for our situation to just purchase eggs from a couple of hatcheries the following spring. But you should be able to overwinter them if you wanted to maintain maintain a flock that is not laying eggs. So what I'll do is go ahead and share my screen. Give me just a minute here. Share screen one. And as I mentioned, you start to look for information when you try a new activity. And a lot of times a way to do a search is to type in what you're looking for and add the word extension. Any search engine. I'm using Google, but in any search engine, just add extension to it. So if you look at turf fertilization, then just type extension. Oftentimes you'll get extension publications. If you know, the UGA has a really good publications resource. If you were to navigate to UGA extension publications, that'll bring you to our search engine of all the publications. But when you search quail, not a lot comes up. And so you're left to look through other sources of information. And so when you think about getting the birds, one of the first things you want to look at is housing, right? You want to be prepared. Like I was saying before, the hatching, they hatch. Let me see, I pulled this up a minute ago. They hatch within 3 weeks. You have chicks, and then within 6 to 8 weeks, you have mature birds that are mating and laying fertilized eggs. So it's pretty quick that you can get a lot. So do be thinking about, the minimum needs that you have. And so let me just zoom in here on this. Do it this way. Here we go. So I'm just zooming in. So this is a any use of anybody is not an endorsement of these companies, but my Shire Farm, we have used them. My family did use them to purchase eggs, but I just simply came here because he had a really good and short blog post here about what you need. So you do need food and water. So you will need to think about that. And I've got some different examples of how my family provided food. The food for quail, so this is another difference, is not always as available. You'll want to check your feed and seed store wherever you're purchasing from. You want to give them game bird feed. It's a higher protein diet. So that is something to consider. I believe Tractor Supply usually carries it, but a lot of times it's in the smaller bag. So if you're looking for a bigger, you may need to talk to your retailer about providing you with bigger bags. You can order it offline as well. We had a local feed and seed store. They had to close down. There was some zoning issues that they were running into. I live in town in Atlanta. And so they were running into some zoning issues with trying to run a feed and seed store, but they would order it for me. In the larger 50-pound bags so that I didn't have to go very often. But that's something to know is that they do perform better and are healthier if you're feeding them a higher protein diet than you might be feeding chickens. It's usually referred to as a game bird feed. And then water. So they do need access to food and water all the time. So that's something to think through. I'll show some different iterations of how we handled watering the birds. And then the second thing to think about is you need to have enough space to have all the birds that you want to have. This blog post is recommending 3 birds per square foot. So you can house them fairly densely, but you do want to think about, and I'll talk some about this, the sex ratio, males to females. My family tried to maintain a ratio of about 1 male to 3 females, 2 or 3 females. The males can get quite aggressive. So if you have multiple males and not enough space or not enough females, they will fight each other. They can be quite aggressive and lethal to each other. They're small birds. They're fun to hold. I mean, that's one thing that's different about them and some other poultry that you might try to keep. They are quite small and easy to handle, but they can beat each other up. And then the other thing, even if you have few males, if you don't have enough females, they can make your female birds much less healthy just by trying to breed with them all the time. And so you'll see if you have too few hens relative to your roosters, you'll see feathers missing. You may see limping or obvious signs of injury in your female birds. So that's an important thing. The other consideration for housing is going to be the height of the cage. Quail evolved a strategy of jumping up if you've ever been quail hunting or seen a video of it, the dogs, usually they use pointers. They'll point to a covey of quail that are hidden in some dense brush, and then hunters will get ready before they send the dog in, and then the birds will often go up before they fly off. I don't think it's quite as exaggerated as a pheasant, but a pheasant is a much bigger bird than quail. But they have a tendency to jump up first and then fly, rather than running or flying off. And so, because of that behavior that they exhibit, and because you interacting with these quail or other animals around may scare these quail sometimes, you want to maintain the right height. And so the recommendation is to keep the cage or pen height between 8 and 12 inches or greater than 6 feet. And the reason for this is that if those quail jump, if you are approaching the pen, the structure, and they spook and jump, if you've got more than, sorry, I said 8 to 12 inches, 18 inches, 8 to 18 inches. So somewhere between a foot, foot and a half height. If you give them more than that, their momentum will be such that they can injure themselves, break their necks, their wings, by hitting the ceiling of that enclosure. So if you're going to have something bigger than 18 inches, the recommendation is to go to as big as 6 feet or higher. And that would be considered more of an aviary rather than a cage or a hutch. Yeah, and then the other thing, and my family found this to be true, using small hardware cloth to enclose the structure, whether it's an aviary or a cage, you will want to use small mesh hardware cloth to create it for a couple of reasons. One, they have smaller feet, so you want to give them something that they can stand on. But also, if a colloquialism is that everything likes chicken. Well, I have chickens as well. We keep a flock of about 12 chickens. And I've only ever in 5 years, I've only ever had one possum get in there and grab a chicken. We've kept it pretty well closed. But when we have quail, everything comes for quail. And I don't know, they do smell different. Their poop has they're eating a different food. They are different animals, but it smells distinctly different than chickens, and that's the only chicken poop, and that's the only thing that I can figure because if we put quail outside, within 48 hours, we will have at least one rat snake, if not multiple rat snakes, attempting to penetrate our defenses. We had a quail. We lost a quail to a rat snake once, and I spent a bunch of time trying to figure out how did that snake get in there. I had half-inch hardware cloth all around the sides of my quail hutch, but the roof was covered by sheet metal. And so what I ended up having to do was take that sheet metal off, and actually under the metal roof to keep them dry, I had to put additional hardware cloth because he found his way under the sheet metal and then down into where the quail were. Where the quail were. That same snake though came back, or another snake rather came back. I used to work from home the first year that we had quail, and so I was able to go outside multiple times during the day. And I know it was the same individual snake. I chased him away 3 times in that day before he finally gave up. The first time I got out there, he was on the roof trying to figure out how to get in there, and I used a rake to move him away from that area. Came back out later. That same snake was trying to push he was on the ground, but pushing up to try to see if there was a weak point in that cage. And I again used the rake to remove him. The third time he saw me coming and got away, and I didn't see him again. But anyway, we keep chickens. They very seldom go in there for our chicken eggs. Occasionally I'll find a snake in our chicken run, but when we have quail, they come. I've heard another story of a resident here in Fulton County had quail once whenever his daughter was very young, and raccoons pulled all their heads off one time. So anyway, things like quail. So these are four really key things. You do want to think about how to keep them always with food and water, keeping them at the right density, and that is for the number of birds, but also the sex ratios. And then making sure that the house is the right height to prevent injury. If you're less than 6 feet tall and greater than 18 inches, your birds might be at risk if they get spooked when they jump. And then hardware cloth, because everything is going to want to try to get in there, and these are small birds. I'll show y'all a few photos that I've got of from our flock. Let's see. So here's one. I'll make this a little bit bigger. So you can get a lot of different colors. These are Coturnix quail. And so we had white birds, this brown color, and then we had some darker ones. This is a sand bath that we gave them. They really will use that. Occasionally I see my chickens do that, but almost every bird every day when we have quail will get into that sand bath and move around. They are it's a way for them to clean themselves and shed insects. I think that it's irritating to insects that might get on them. So that's why they're doing that. But it's just dry play sand. And we would replace it when it became soiled with these birds' waste. This is our first food option. And you can see there's a kind of a problem with that is the birds were able to get into this food container. So this was not our final iteration. They also waste quite a lot of this food. So if you provide food in an open source like this, there's potential for them to foul it with their waste, but also to throw that food out. Along the left side here, I've got a white pipe with these red valves, these nipple valves. Our birds were able to peck the metal nipple, and that would open the valve. A little bit of water would come out. So that was one way that we watered them. But then we also just had an upturned bottle here that water was coming out of. So there's a couple different ways in this photo. You can see the sticks that we've put in here. We had that gave them a sense of it wasn't provided really for a roost. We didn't see them roosting like that. They are ground dwelling birds primarily. They were more there to give them a sense that they are hiding, because that's what in their natural habitat, they might be in brush piles and in thick areas. And so that's why we have the sticks there. This was an improvised rabbit hutch. So we purchased this. I think actually they were just giving it away. But we picked this up. It was somebody else's rabbit hutch. And we just converted it for these quail. And so that's what this dark area was a house for the rabbit. But they most of the time they would lay their eggs in this dark area here to the right. You can see the mesh. So how did that, maybe you won't be surprised that a rat snake was able to get in. But if you look over here on the left side of this photo, I've got pretty fine mesh hardware cloth along the bottom. But if you see where this pipe, where this hose is coming in, this is chicken wire at a much larger mesh size. And so I had to go back later and cover that up. That was one way that snakes were able to get into that chicken wire. And again, I don't have that same issue with my chickens, but when I have quail, a snake is always tries to find a way to get in there. Let's see. A couple more things about, okay, so here we'll just go through these a little bit. So these are younger birds. Their heads are still yellow, so these are immature birds. But again, we've got the sand bath here. What I'm showing here, and I've got a better picture of this in a minute, but this is just a large commercially available waterer, but we filled it with rocks in the bottom. These birds are big enough that they're not going to drown in this water. But when they are chicks, they are very small. And we did lose birds to drowning. So in this case, we've got open food containers. We've tried a bunch of different methods for keeping the chicks. So we would brood them often indoors. We've talked about though, especially if you're doing it in the summertime, that the nighttime temperatures are typically high enough that we could probably get away with brooding and allowing the chicks to mature outdoors. But this is one, it was a kiddie pool that we did, and we put down the pet pee pads. If you have indoor pets and they're not housebroken, that's what we lined the bottom with, because they will produce a lot of waste. In this batch, we probably have close to 20 or 25 chicks. Most of them are just under these heaters. That's what these red devices are here. They're plate heaters. So the heat element is a block underneath, so it gives them a space to get under there, and then the height of these is adjustable, so I can move that heat source. The red pyramids on the top are to prevent the birds as they grow from getting on top of that heat source and defecating and fouling that up. The waterer here, right here in the front, this container was the water, and you can probably see something gray in there, but those are rocks that we've put in there. And again, that's to prevent drowning. We did have birds, chicks, fall into the water containers before and not be able to get out and drown. And that's a sad morning. Most of these photos, my son is smiling, but he was not smiling that morning. Here's a video of them moving around. This is a different container that we were using. So this is, in the last one, they were in a kiddie pool. In this one, they are just in a Rubbermaid or Tupperware style container. And you can see they're quite active. They're very light and fun to hold at this stage. We would invite kids from the neighborhood. My son really liked it, but we'd invite all the time whenever we had chicks. We were inviting people over. You can see how messy they are, though, with the food. That's what most of this spread around on the ground is, of the lighter color, is their food. You can see right down here at the bottom, the chicks are getting into the waterer. So we are having to clean that out, which is kind of a pain with the rocks, because you're having to dig those rocks out, wash those off, and then refill it with fresh water. But this is what we did during the day. Over the top here, we just have a roll of window screen. Again, to keep them from jumping up. At this stage, they don't jump that much, but because they grow so fast, if you leave to go to work and they're not jumping, by the time you get home, they might be jumping. When we talk about sex ratios, maintaining that right sex ratio, the one example I talked about how killer they can be. I don't have any photos of this, so it'll just be a description of it. But we got up one morning, walked the dog, we're getting ready to leave the house, and we heard a quail crow. And so I'll play a video in just a minute, and hopefully y'all can hear that audio of them crowing. And so that indicated to us that at least one male was mature, but likely more of them were. And we debated about whether or not we should go ahead and sex the birds and separate them that morning. We opted to go to work and do it after work. Well, when we got home, one of the males was decapitated by the other males. So they really did get aggressive that day. And so I would encourage you to, when you approach that maturity date, when you think they might be about to mature, be ready to go ahead and sex them. Give yourself some time to do that. I'll play their crow real quick, and then I will also show you how we sexed the birds, how we determined whether they were male or female. Oh, slow it down. Let me back this up. Sorry, I didn't want it in slow motion. So hopefully you're able to hear that. They're not it's not a very offensive crow. It sounds a lot more like a songbird. Because of where I live in the Atlanta area and we're in a dense neighborhood, we don't keep male chickens because of their crowing, and we just want to be good neighbors. For those, we're just keeping them for egg production, and we usually purchase pullets for our chicken flock. But in the case of quail, we wanted them for meat. So we needed males and females so that we could have fertilized eggs, so that when we harvested, they would replace themselves. So they don't have an offensive crow, and that's one indication. But once so your neighbors probably won't recognize it as livestock or as birds that you're keeping. It'll just kind of fade into the natural audio of your neighborhood birds that you have. But you'll recognize the call. And if you hear that and you haven't gone out there to sex them and get the ratios right in your coops, is something you might want to consider. Yeah, I tried to look up that there are ways that you can look at their patterns. They are sexually dimorphic, meaning the males and the females have different appearances. So you can look at some of that with the feathers, but the easiest way that we found to do it was to and we would do this with each quail. Most of the time, the protocol that we would follow is we would go out to the cage and remove all of the birds into a container, just something with a lid so that they can't jump out. And then one at a time, we would pick those birds up, turn them over to where you can see their vent. So birds have only one opening down there, where they excrete waste, their eggs, and then also the males. And if you squeeze them slightly, a male will emit this foam, a white foam. So that's the carrier of their sperm. That's how they will fertilize the females. And if you hear crowing, or it's been 6 to about 8 weeks, if a male is mature and you turn it over and squeeze slightly, just a little bit of pressure around the edges. So the way I would hold the bird, usually my thumbs would be on either side of the vent, about here and here. You squeeze just slightly, that foam comes out, and then we would have a container for males and a container for females. We'd count them up, and and make sure that we were approaching that 1 to 3, 1 male to 3 females. Let's see. The another thing about quail is how many egg they each hen will lay about 1 egg per day. But the natural strategy for quail is to lay a clutch of eggs and then sit on those. So you don't need a nest box, like they don't lay in a specific area. They'll lay in the cage or the aviary around, so you will have to hunt for those eggs. They're unlike the chickens where they return to the same nest box, and that makes it convenient. But the hen, when she's laying eggs, she wants to get a good clutch before she sits on them, so that don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. She wants multiples before she sits down. We were removing eggs often enough that we never had a hen go broody, a quail hen go broody, where they were actually sitting on the clutch trying to hatch them themselves. So we would collect eggs every day, store them on the counter, and then when we got enough, our incubator, this is our incubator. I don't have a picture of the incubator by itself, like with the eggs in it. This is either they've already started hatching, but our incubator will hold 48 quail eggs, and it rotates them every hour to keep them from being too still and the yolk or the chick sticking to the side. But this is a picture of a recently hatched one here. So so we're in lockdown right now, so these eggs are not being turned. We're in the last 3 days, and we're allowing them to hatch. This is what that bird looks like. We will leave them in for about 48 hours after the first hatch. They have enough energy stores that they don't need food or water for that first 48 hours. So we would try to note when the first chick hatched, and then 48 hours from that time. You're trying to maintain a pretty high humidity. So if you remove that lid to take the chicks out each time, you can reduce the chances that other birds will be able to hatch by that fluctuation in humidity. So I'll show here. Another thing that we experienced is they can get themselves out of the shells. They are sometimes slow. Some will come out quick and very aggressively. Others are a bit slower, but let the birds get themselves out of the eggs. That is something I'll caution you. I'm not nearly as sentimental as my wife or my son, but even I was looking at some of these birds and thinking, man, I could really help you out if I could open that up and try to remove the shell or crack it a little bit wider to help them get out. If they can't get out of that shell by themselves, they're unlikely to be very successful or healthy out of the shell. We had one chicken that was quail chick that was dragging a shell. We only ever had one like this, but there was a connection between the one half of the shell and this chick, and so it would move around, and it was the cord was coming from like the connection was from the chick's vent, and it was connected to the shell. I thought I was being helpful by removing that shell, and that ended up actually being a fatal injury to that bird. Had I waited, the chick would have continued to grow, the cord connecting them would have been severed and naturally, like most of the other birds. So that even that, if they've got a shell on their head, they'll get it off. If they've got shell connected to them, just let them deal with it. Because I did lose a bird trying to be helpful. We may have a picture. This one may. I'm trying to pull up this video here where you may be able to see them trying to hatch. You can see it's cracked. This is a little bit longer. My wife is whispering there. Oh, that's just one being curious. But they'll get on top of each other and move each other around. So that can be helpful. Oh, this is actually the one that was dragging the egg. So he didn't make it. Let's see. This is how small they are when they first come out. So this is probably a 72-hour-old bird. So been hatched for between 2 and 3 days. So they're very small. Let's see. Here's another picture of this brooder. So again, this is just providing heat. You could use a lamp. This is maybe a little bit more energy efficient. It doesn't get nearly as warm. And then these legs, there are 4 legs. You see these marks here. That's how it can be adjusted for the height. So as your chicks grow, you can actually raise and lower that. If you have chicks of different height, you don't have to do it evenly. You can raise one side up more than the other so that birds are able to fit and everybody's able to get the level of the heat at the level that they need it. I'm going to go ahead and go to this other set of photos that I took this morning to kind of show how we changed. Whoops. Let me see here. That's right. To show how we changed our setup. And then I'll entertain any questions that y'all have. Okay. These photos aren't opening up as quickly as I thought they would, so I apologize for that. See if I can make it bigger over here. So this is just a quick picture of that, like what it looks like to buy that brooder. Like that's the box that it comes in. But what I was really interested in showing y'all was this is a feeder that we I'm sorry about this. These photos are not opening up like I thought they would.
James, try clicking on the ones that are images instead of the
Video.
HEIC file.
Yeah. Oh, that HEIC is something different, huh? Let's see. No. Well, what we pivoted to so we moved from the feeders. Oh, here's an example. So we took a big PVC pipe and made it run through the ceiling of the cage so that we could give them food without having to open the cage. At the bottom of this pipe, there are holes in the bottom that will fill this jar. And then there are holes cut in the bottom of that jar that the birds can access. But that was a good change that we made from this version where before we had it open, we lost a lot less feed this way. Depending on how many birds you have, You will have to refill that. So the bigger the pipe that you can reasonably fit, the less often you have to fill that feeder. But yeah, I'll stop here, and if there are any questions, I can address those, and then if not, I can keep talking some about the some of these features. But yeah, are there any questions?
While they're potentially thinking about questions, uh, thank you so much. This was wonderful. I did want to ask you about processing. So, did you process
Mhm.
your own birds? How
Yeah.
did you learn how to do that? What are any suggestions you have on that front?
Yeah, good question. And I don't have any photos of this portion, so there won't be no warning necessary here. But yes, we did process our own. I was actually surprised at how many of my neighbors wanted to come help us process birds, wanted to experience that and know what it was like. Um, and so I had the advantage maybe of growing up processing wild birds. So I did have that experience going into it. But again, whenever you're doing your research, there are lots of people who have videos of themselves um, dispatching, euthanizing the birds and then also processing them. But the best approach that I came up with was to I would typically hold the bird. I'm right hand dominant, so I would typically hold the bird in my left hand and just pull without hesitation. Just pull, and the head will come off, and that bird will stop moving within about 30 seconds to 1 minute. Um, their nerves will continue to kick or move those wings. So I have a pretty firm grip in my left hand and then just pull that head off. They are very small, even when they're mature relative to chickens. So the idea of trying to wring their neck and things like that, we didn't have much success with that. Um, if you try to use scissors or something like that to decapitate them, the feathers, you just will impede those scissors from being fast or the quickest way that I found to do it and that we felt was most humane. We always did this if we weren't harvesting all the birds, we would always do this in an area away from the cage or enclosure of the live birds. We didn't want them to see what we were doing. And even the birds that were waiting, we tried to keep them in a container with an opaque lid so that no birds are having to watch that. But yeah, hold in the left hand, pull off the head, and then I would do all the birds that way before I started processing so that I was done with the euthanization part. And then I would have headless carcasses on the processing surface. I usually did this in my backyard with a water hose nearby and a bucket for the trash. Um, to be quicker, I often did not pluck them. I just skinned them. So after removing the head, I would cut cut the legs off, cut the wings off, and then make a small incision at the vent. And from there, you could peel the skin away from with the feathers on it. You're peeling the skin away from the meat. Um, I would typically do also a spatchcock method. So once I removed the skin with the feathers and got rid of that pelt, I would take a pair of good sturdy kitchen scissors and cut up the backbone. So I would typically start at the back of the bird and cut towards the neck. So I was taking out the backbone and the neck, and then all the internal organs are exposed that you can, if you wanted to separate any of those for consumption or fish bait or whatever you're using that for, you can get at the internal organs and clean it out. I always saved the necks and the backbones. They make great broth. We didn't usually spend the time to pick the meat off after, but I would put them in the pressure cooker and produce broth from that. So usually I would end up with a bird that would open up from the back because I was cutting up the backbone. I usually cut the legs off, so that when I put them away in the freezer, I have the breast and the sides with two legs per bird. You can the wings are very small, so you can get the wings. You could pluck them too, or try to remove the feather so that you can keep that skin on them. My brother-in-law had a recipe though for fried turkey that I would use. So the best way we found to fix them, to prepare them, was to cover the meat in yellow mustard, just smothered in yellow mustard, cover it in a Creole seasoned fish fry, and then fry that in 375-degree. We use peanut oil, but whatever kind of oil you use, and that is a very tasty meal.
That sounds delicious. We're all coming to your house next time you have your quail going.
Yes, yeah.
I did receive another question about the male to female ratio. So you said one male to three females is ideal. Is there a maximum? How far can you push that to have more females in the mix?
Okay, good question. Yeah. So, I guess it's hard to think in ratios, maximum, minimum. You can have that's the smallest ratio you want to have, male to female. The total number of birds is going to be determined by the cage size. So the MyShire reference that we looked at said 3 birds per square foot. So that'll dictate how many, total birds you can have. But you could have very few males relative to females. You could have 1 male to 5 or 6 females. What's going to happen there, though, is that fewer of your eggs are going to be fertilized. So if you're interested in raising quail for egg production, you don't even need roosters unless you want to be able to have your flock replenish itself if your hens got further than you got out of their egg laying age. So there's no minimum requirement for the number of males depending on what you're trying to do. But what will happen if you have the more females you have relative to the males, the lower the chances that every egg laid will be fertile, because every hen may not have been bred since the last time it laid an egg. So because each hen is laying about an egg a day, maintaining that 1 to 3 male to female gives you a ratio where the males are not overbreeding your females and affecting the hen health, and they're also not overly competitive with each other and injuring your males. But it also tries to make sure that every hen is bred every day so that all the eggs that you're collecting have a high probability of being fertilized. That reminded me too, I wanted to show y'all this video real quick. There's no sound. This is just egg scissors. Quail eggshells are very hard, and they have a much thicker membrane around the egg. So if you tried to crack it, it can be tough. What a lot of people will use is this these egg scissors. So it's special scissors, quail egg scissors, and then you can cut the top off and pour the egg out. It's a much more efficient way to get those eggs. So you can see there's a round part that the egg goes up through, and then the blade slices through the top. You will sometimes break the yolks this way. If you boil these eggs before you crack them, you'll just be peeling that membrane for a little bit longer. But that is a thing if you're raising them for eggs rather than for meat.
This has been awesome, James. I know we have at least one more question about keeping quail. So typically someone, like you were saying, is going to start with chickens and start to expand their flock to some other birds. So can quail be kept with other poultry, or do they need to be kept separately?
Yeah, good question. So I think I might have some photos here. Let's see. My chickens and quail were housed very close to each other, but not in the same container. So if you look into the background of this photo, that is my chicken run behind it. So my chickens are in this area. That's their coop, this white block up here in the top right corner. And so they were housed very close to each other, but not in the same run. You probably could put them together. In my case, the run is not super big for the number of chickens that I keep. So the likelihood of injury for my quail was higher if I put them in there. The other thing is because I wanted the quail for meat, I wanted easy access to every individual bird so that I could quickly get them out and then take them for euthanasia and then processing. So I found it better. I keep my birds in cages that are about breast height in terms of like how high off the ground they are, and they have a door for easy access to getting those birds in and out. But we do keep them close together. You could put them together. You would likely lose a lot of quail eggs to chickens smashing them and on the ground. But yeah, good question.
Thank you again, James. I don't see any further questions, and I know we're right at 1 o'clock and everyone is extremely busy. So greatly appreciate your time and sharing all of your information on quail, and hopefully we can have you to Pike County to process some quail soon.
Okay, yeah, let me know.
Thank you, James, and thank you to everyone for joining us. And I'll have this recording up here shortly. So thank you, James.
All right, thanks. Bye.